All right, good morning. Thank you to our audience both here and online for joining us today. I'm Beth Iwata, Vice President of Development and Marketing. I just want to say a few words. Like many of you, I have a deep appreciation for history, art, and culture, and exploring my roots and what it means to be Japanese American in Hawaii feels very natural to me. So that's why I'm working for JCCH. Over the past year, though, with the current political climate, I feel like the mission has become even more personal, and I feel an even stronger need to protect our history and truth for my kids and the future generations. So today we have a wonderful opportunity to learn about the research and work of these three women. I'm going to start off giving a brief introduction of their backgrounds. Sheila Chun has a MA in history from Indiana University. She has volunteered at our Tokioka Heritage Resource Center since 2005. She was a managing editor of Family Torn Apart, the internment story of the Otokichi Muin Ozaki family, and she helped edit the English translation of Ireichō 1010. She has been involved in research for the Hawaii Internee Database since 2016 and assisted in transitioning it to be the online resource that it is today. So thank you, Sheila, for your many years of work. Kelli Nakamura is a professor at Kapi Olani Community College. Her research interests focus on Japanese and Japanese American history, and she has published countless articles in history journals and in the media. She also teaches at the Ethnic Studies and History Department at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, focusing on race relations during World War II. Her new book, Legacies of Incarceration, The World War II Experience of Hawaii's Japanese, was just released last month and is available for purchase in our gift shop. And Kelli will be available for signing books as well afterwards. And then to my far left, Joanne Watanabe Erceg is a retired software engineer who has been traveling the country on a bucket list project to visit World War II sites of Japanese American incarceration and other dark history sites. To date, she has visited 132 sites and historic places. She's also helping to update names in the Ireichō Book of Names, which she'll tell us more about later. So to start things off, I just wanted to ask each of them to, before I say that. We will proceed, each of the presenters will give us a 10-minute presentation about their work, and then we'll welcome questions from the audience. And so before we begin, I just wanted to ask each presenter what first inspired you to pursue your line of work.
For me, I think it's my family history. My grandfather was a Hawaii internee. He was a Buddhist priest on the Big Island. So I've known about the internment. I heard about it all while I was growing up, and I spent many years in California. I heard about the mass incarceration there, but I was especially interested in the Hawaii internment, and that's what brought me to JCCH.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kelli Nakamura. The reason why I got interested in researching the internment or World War II history of Japanese Americans here in Hawaii is that my family has a very kind of complicated history. On one side, we did have family members who served very valiantly, very bravely with the 100th and 442. We also had, on the other side, individuals who served in the Japanese army. And my other side is from Hiroshima, Japan. So we also experienced that part of the war. So to understand kind of the complicated legacies and the intertwined histories that I think is more typical for Hawaii families, that's what drove me to my research. So thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Joanne Erceg, and the reason why I embarked on this adventure that I've been on since 2022 is because it was a passion project for me. I waited all my life to be able to like, okay, check out and just do this and just focus on it. And I'll be telling you more about it during my slide deck, but that's the basic crux of it. And I've always supported diversity. I was the president of our business resource groups and at AT&T and NCR and Teradata and so forth. The president of the APA Association, and run awards and all this kind of stuff just to promote inclusion. So that can't go away. We have to keep doing it.
So good morning. I'm going to talk today a little bit about the JCCH Internee Database, which you see, whoops, up here. Yeah. The database was developed by a by a JCCH volunteer, Tatsumi Hayashi. He was a longtime volunteer, very important volunteer at the Resource Center. He was bilingual, and among the many projects that he worked on was a development more than 20 years ago of the first comprehensive list of people from Hawaii who were incarcerated in Hawaii. I became involved in the project about 10 years ago when Hayashi-san's database was transitioned to become the online resource that we can access now. So you can find it online if you Google search Hawaii Internee Database. You can also find it if you go online to the JCCH website. It's available there as well. So I thought I'd just share it with you, talk a little bit about it. I think one of the really wonderful things about the database is that it is searchable. It contains the names of more than 2,400 Hawaii residents who were incarcerated during World War II. And each individual has his or her own entry in the database. You can search here, as you see, by using various forms. You can search by keyword, which is one of the things that I like the best about it. Whoops, I lost my pointer. Come back. Well, where'd it go? Oh, okay, thank you. There we go. You can also search by name. It's searchable by various biographical pieces of information, by birth year, by gender. You can search by generation, were they Issei or Sansei. We can search by residence, by, for example, their island of residence. You can search by employment also. That one I think is not quite as helpful. We sometimes have issues with employment data because many of these individuals lost their jobs after Pearl Harbor. So the records may reveal other part-time jobs that were not really truly their profession or their employment. So that one's a little more nebulous. You can also search by internment site. The drop-down menu provides a big list. These are not all internment sites. But if you know the internment site, you can find one. For example, Camp Forest in Tennessee. So to give you an example of what our site contains, thought we'd look for a particular, oh, thank you. So this is a typical example, an example of what our the page would look like, what an entry would look like. This happens to be an entry for a man named Shoyu Kitajima. He was a Buddhist priest from Kauai. His entry contains photographs from the JCCH. JCCH has a rather extensive collection of historical photos from World War II and the internment. And when we can, we post the photos to the photos of the internee. So we share here this photo of Buddhist ministers from Hawaii. It was taken in Santa Fe camp. So when available, we post the photos that we have, which I think really helps to enrich the entry. You can find here his biographical information, his Japanese name. If we know it, we provide that. His alternative name, many of them did have alternative names, and they often had alternative spellings, a lot of them. So if we know that, we provide that. Date of birth, his generation, his residence. He was sent to the mainland in March 1942. Another feature of the database is that we can link to related internees. So in this situation, Reverend Kitajima's wife and his children they entered the internment system to reunify with their husband and father. So they went up to the mainland. They spent their time largely in Jerome. But here you can see, you can access his wife's entry here too, and it shows you, it provides again her information. We provide here the history of the internee's internment, the various sites he went to. In the case of Reverend Kitajima, he was incarcerated at 8 different sites. That's a lot, but it's not unusual. I think among Hawaii internees, the individual who was sent to the most number of sites was an individual who was sent to 13 different places in Hawaii and on the mainland. What we see here with Reverend Kitajima is that he also had a brother who was interned, Yoshio Kitajima. And Yoshio Kitajima was also a Buddhist priest. And his family, his wife, and his children joined him in internment also. So one of the really nice things about the database is that we can explain, we can show the relationships between the internees. And we have come to understand that there are a lot of relationships going on. Familial, through employment, through community service. And when we can link these, we provide that. And you can click on the names and it'll take you to the entries for the other individuals. I wanted to share with you one more page. This is Ishiko Mori. And she belongs to a very unique group of Hawaii internees, 8 women who were sent into incarceration. She's very different from the wives and the daughters of the internees who entered the internment system to reunify with their husband or their father. These 8 Hawaii women were investigated and arrested and incarcerated on the mainland because of their own status. In this case, Ishiko Mori was a physician. We see again here her biographical data. We have photographs of her. We provide here her internment locations. And when we have further information about the individual, we will provide a short write-up of them. It's part of our effort to try to humanize these people, to make them just not just a Japanese name, but to show the individuals for who they were. Ishiko Mori was part of a larger family of doctors in Honolulu, the very prominent Mori family of physicians. Her husband here, Motokazu Mori, was also interned. Ishiko Mori and Motokazu Mori were suspected of being spies. So they were arrested and detained. So her husband's page is linked here. Motokazu. He was a surgeon. This photograph here is unique in our collection. It is one of the few photographs that we have of an internee family shortly after their return to Hawaii. This photograph was taken in 1945. So Ishiko and Motokazu were interned for the duration of the war. They returned in late 1945, and this photo is taken once they returned to their family. This man that you see sitting here in the back was the patriarch of the family, Iga Mori. He also was arrested shortly after the bombing. He was held without charges for several weeks and released around Christmas time. Their son, he was one of the big names in the Honolulu medical community. He was one of the founders of Kuakini Hospital. This is their son, Victor. He was 18 in 1941. He also was picked up and held without charges for a period of time. Victor would go on to become a physician as well. So within this family, 3 generations of incarcerees, 4 doctors. So yeah, that's an example of our database and what you can find there if you go and explore a little bit. Thank you.
So we're going to have a very quick kind of PowerPoint, kind of going over some of the coverage in what you will find in my book here. It's going to magically appear. Okay. Is it here? It's on my laptop. Yes. Okay, perfect. Okay, let's see if this will work. And we can just do page down. Page up, page down. Okay. Let me just take off this kind of irritating notification here. Okay, so today, let's see if I can minimize this. We're going to be looking at some of the incarceration sites that are going to be covered in my book. Looking at essentially Hawaii incarceration, we noticed something very kind of interesting with what actually happens. Okay, so as we know, that you can essentially, this is what will contextualize the Internee Database. There are at least 17 sites across the various islands of Hawaii in which we have identified known incarceration sites. And again, they spread out throughout most of the major islands. And luckily, I was able to actually visit most of these sites that were actually remaining. So the only island that I actually didn't visit was, of course, the 2 islands of Ni'ihau and Ko'oholave. Okay. Okay. So one critical kind of difference that will define essentially mainland incarceration sites versus, of course, Hawaii incarceration sites is the fact that when you look at Hawaii incarceration sites, the idea that, of course, martial law was in action at this particular point will, of course, influence the kind of sites that were in fact created. So the majority, of course, were Army internment sites. That's what they called it back then. But we also see kind of a very unique confluence or involvement of the plantation system here in Hawaii, which is something very distinct and something very unusual that didn't occur, of course, on the mainland. So what we see here is that plantation officials were more than happy to provide the use of various structures or community structures, existing incarceration sites, like, for example, jails and prisons, as well as, of course, community structures like gymnasiums and language schools, among others. And in total, we had approximately 2,000, 2,400, as Joanne actually mentioned earlier. Versus, of course, the mainland incarceration sites that will be discussed later when we're talking about a more variety of incarceration sites and various usage of federal facilities here. Okay. Now, what I'm going to be doing is going through some of the kind of the visual context of the differences of these particular sites, because it's one thing to mention that there's these various sites across, of course, these various islands, but really to kind of look at the distinct differences among the sites. So, of course, one of the first places that individuals were incarcerated at would be at, of course, Sand Island, which these inmates were housed in tents, very hastily constructed, and this being December, there were, typical rains at this time, where many of these inmates reported, of course, there were these floods, that essentially these tarps that were used to essentially house these tents were leaking at these various weeks and months in which they were held. Okay. Eventually, they would be sent to more formal facilities out in Ewa at Honouliuli. And we see, of course, a more kind of formalized army-style barracks. What is very interesting, actually, about Honouliuli is that the primary use of this particular site was as one of the largest POW sites in the Pacific that housed the majority being Okinawan, Korean, Italian, even some German prisoners brought from the Italian front of the war. These inmates actually constitute a minority of the prison population here. And you will see, in fact, very different kinds of facilities that other inmates would actually experience. Now, across, of course, our neighbor islands, we see, for example, on the Big Island, language schools being utilized. We also see, of course, Kilauea Military Camp being used as an incarceration site. And this was drawn by a very famous local artist here, George Hoshida, who provide kind of visual evidence of kind of a contemporary at that particular time view of what these incarceration centers actually look like. Okay. Another place that they actually housed prisoners was on the smaller islands like Molokai and Lanai. And unfortunately, at those two particular islands, Molokai and Lanai, we see kind of various differing stages of preservation literally taking place before our various eyes. In Molokai, at one of the parks, Malama Park, we see, in fact, the two sites have been removed from their original location and are currently sitting and deteriorating at a particular park that is used to house canoes and boats and picnics for families. It's not a very well-maintained park, but we do see essentially these two sites being so-called preserved, or at least left there for people to actually come and visit. And you will see essentially these are essentially the jail houses that are being essentially left out in the elements. They are literally falling apart with no efforts to actually preserve them. And there's no placard or identifying kind of signage to determine what exactly these sites are. Many kind of younger locals don't actually know what these sites are. They just think they're just deteriorating community structures. Okay. On Kauai, we actually see some sites have been absolutely destroyed. So because of the need to renovate and to essentially provide larger jail and courthouse facilities, this was the old courthouse site, as well as, of course, the old jail site that was actually utilized. This, of course, no longer exists, along with the other site, which is, of course, currently the current jail on Kauai itself. So you see, essentially, these are kind of historic photographs of these sites taken a few decades later, but pretty much this is how the sites would have appeared for these inmates. Okay. And finally, for one of your tourist destination spots on Lanai Island, we have on Dole Park, which is a very long rectangular park, dotted by restaurants and shops and community structures. We have this, the historic Lanai Jail. And you can actually go in there and visit the site, visit the jail, and actually experience, for better or for worse, what these inmates actually experience. So what you'll see here is that you can actually go in, walk into these sites, literally take photographs, and see kind of the facilities that these inmates actually experience. And these are the kinds of accommodations, we'll put it that way, that was allotted to these prisoners. So what you'll see here is that some sites have been preserved very nicely, some are in the process of being preserved, some are entirely deteriorated, some are entirely destroyed. And it really kind of speaks to the fact that Hawaii incarceration, or internment, as we often also know that as, is something that is a phenomenon that still needs to be more greatly understood by more community members to understand what are these existing structures, what are the histories, what are the peoples, what are some of the stories that still are to come out of these particular sites. So this is where it helps to kind of contextualize the stories that Sheila is talking about with the Internee Database and talking about these various sites and visiting the various essentially locations in which these individuals were often sent to multiple times, to multiple places, and to multiple islands. So for example, if you were on Lanai or Molokai, you would often be sent to the more neighboring island, for example, like on Maui, then sent to Oahu, and then being shipped off to another island. And that's what accounts for the numerous incarceration sites. But to provide more details about the mainland incarceration centers, I want to turn it over to our next presenter. So thank you.
Okay. I just want to show you this little bag of Daruma dolls. This bag has accompanied me from day one on every single site that I have visited. And so of the incarceration, the formal incarceration sites, I kind of lost track a little bit, the account, but the official account for just incarceration sites is 106. But there's, as you know, there are a lot of related places along the way, and I'll show you a map later. But this presentation is supposed to be about, consoling, how we console the spirits, right? That's what Ireichō means. Right, that's what it means, and you're familiar with Ireichō, the commemoration of Okinawa, the Battle of Okinawa. It's the same idea, right? And so what I'm going to talk about is what I do, and what the Ireichō project, how we overlap, and we're actually doing the same thing but in a different way, right? Oh, what happened? Hey. I can't really read that. Okay, here we go. Okay, so about me. So you mentioned that I'm a retired engineer. I used to work on massively parallel database software, hardware, performance, security, you name it, right? So I waited until I just worked myself to death, and at age 70, I retired and said, okay, I'm going to execute my bucket list now. And I had been to some of these sites previously, but I said, okay, I'm going to do the whole thing all over again and start from square one. And on my dad's side of the family, I'm Yonsei. I have 25 blood relatives. They were all living and working in Southern California who were incarcerated at up to 8 different camps during World War II. We're talking, if you count the assembly centers and so forth, Santa Anita, we got the Owens Valley, Manzanar, Heart Mountain, Rohrer, Jerome, Santa Fe, New Mexico, Fort Lincoln in North Dakota, and the San Pedro INS, and maybe Tuna Canyon. We're not sure. One of the uncles was one of those guys that just got shifted all over the place as an enemy alien, and we kind of lost track of him, okay, during that period. But I also had 2 uncles in the 442nd. They're brothers of my grandmother, my dad's side. But the interesting part of is that led me to all of this is that both of my parents were 10 years old when they went in. My mother went through Heart Mountain, and when she was 10, and my dad was at Manzanar when he was 10. And so, what the important thing to note about that is, they were old enough to know that something horrible was happening. Okay, they knew. My mother would say, when she was going through this, she thought we were going to die. That's what she said. She was 10. Okay, so they were old enough to know that something horrible was happening, but they were too young to do anything about it. Okay, so they did what they needed to do when they were just adolescents coming into teen years, right? But unlike a lot of my contemporaries, because I grew up in Gardena, California, one of the Japanese American enclaves, back in the 50s, 60s. Nobody else ever talked about it. None of the parents ever talked about any of this, right? But my mother was incredibly vocal about it. She was so traumatized by some of this that she had to say it out loud, okay? And so that's why I knew about it. And I was one of those. I was that student that was always arguing with the history teachers in junior high and high school. They're like, "Oh, that never happened." Yeah, it did. My mother said so, okay? And seriously. And so I made it my mission to someday go to as many as I possibly could, right? However many that was. And we all knew about the 10. We knew about the assembly centers. There's like 22 of them, something like this, right? Oh yeah, I could do that, right? So that's what happened. It's not moving. Oh, okay. So I had a plan. After I retired in 2022, I said, okay, I'm going to get an RV. This is my RV right here. That's a Beskar, a steel box, okay? It's a Winnebago Travato 2022 KL, right? Fully lithium packed, fully self-contained. I could drive this thing anywhere. I could park it anywhere. I could go anywhere I needed to go in this thing, and okay, well, I've driven vans before, in my time, and all this sort of thing. I said, well, how, this is the best way for me to travel. Because when you look at the map where all these places are, if you were trying to go to as many places as I was trying to go to, it would take forever. You'd have to fly there, or you'd have to drive around, and then, you have a car, you want to drive from place to place, you need a hotel, but if you're old like me, you spend all your time looking for a bathroom, this kind of thing, right? Do you know what I'm saying, right? So, yeah. And then I would cover the sites using the MPS map, the one we've all seen. I'll show it in a minute. And then I would use Densho, because at that point in time, the Ireichō was not available, right? And so I had books. I had piles of books in my rig. It was crazy. I was trying to haul all this stuff around and try to read it. And I had internet access, but not great. Some of these places, many of these places are in the middle of nowhere, next to nothing, okay? And yeah, and so people say, oh, well, if you have an RV, you can use Starlink or whatever. Yeah, has anybody ever tried using Starlink? And if you're driving around forget it. So, and I said, okay, and as along the way, if there was anything related, any sites related, I would stop there. And then I started including any massacre sites that I came across in my travels. So I did go to places like Camp Savage and Camp Shelby and so forth, because I could, right? So let's see. So this is that map. Okay, there's about 50 places on this map. I thought, oh, okay, I could do that. What's the big deal, right? I could do that. But then there's way more. There's way more. Yeah. This is much more accurate, but there's 70 some odd sites on here, but still that's not all of them. Okay? But you recognize this, and you can see over on you see the East Coast there, and places like that. And I thought, oh, I might have to fly there and take a rental car or something if I'm going to be in New York or Boston or Chicago or something like this. I don't know if I can do it, right? We'll see. then, so I went on my way. When I left home, my driveway in my rig in July of 2022, I had only gone like 40 miles in any particular direction in that thing, and I had to do a lot of shakedown, camping, and so forth, because there were things. That rig is so complicated. There's a lot of things that didn't work when I bought it, and it was brand new. Okay, but the Ireichō wasn't even out yet. So I did the first loop, basically leaving San Diego, going all the way through Utah, to Nevada, through Utah to Wyoming, and started at Heart Mountain at their 80th anniversary pilgrimage. That's where I started, right? Then I just started going around and circling around and tried to hit as many WRA sites as I could in that one loop. And I was gone 6 weeks on that first loop. And I took a week's vacation in Canada to visit my friends. And so I come back and it's like, oh, they've just launched the Ireichō. Has anybody in here signed up to stamp the book when it comes here next April? Yeah. Okay, has anybody already stamped the book since they? Okay, good, great, that's great. The Array project it's hugely meaningful, right? Because everything about it is there's a lot of symbolism in it. So one of the things about it is that the whole purpose is to recognize and remember and commemorate all the people who were locked up, right? And the effort under the covers is to eliminate all the duplicates from all these documents that were like floating around all over the place. The first go around, they started with all of the WRA final accountability reports that Densho had already captured and had tried to catalog and so forth, and they took it from there. But trying to get rid of all the duplicates so that if it's you, right, and you were in 5 different camps, it would show up correctly in the database. The book of names, you will appear once, right? But all the places that you were incarcerated, that's in the back end database, the Ireichō, right? Okay. So, I don't know if anybody's realized this or not, but that little burger stack there next to the red lines, okay, that's actually a symbol, and it symbolizes the whole project. That's a gorinto, right? Each line represents something, earth from the camps, because that's what they did. Is for 75 of the camps, including 6 that were here in Hawaii, they collected some soil so that the soil could be brought back, posted on these posts, but also some of it used to create a ceramic tile that's on the cover of the book. Okay, so that's where the fire comes in. It was the ceramic tiles were fired, right, to incorporate all the soil from 75 camps. The wood is the paper pages. The water is in the ink for the Hanko stamp, and the metal is the gold leaf that's on the title of the book. Okay, and so I have some information here about. Okay, it was modeled after the Kakocho. That's a book of names that you would see at Buddhist temples. Periodically when there's some special thing going on, and then the database is referred to as Zo, Ireichō, and I'll talk a little bit more about what that is too. And then the next phase of the project, a big phase, is Ireihi, which is the monument, an actual physical monument, right? And all of this was modeled after the consoling towers at Manzanar and Rower, if anybody's been to those camps. So this is what it would look like when the book was staged at the Japanese American National Museum before it went on the road. So you walk into this little room, and there's 3 sides, 25 camps on on one side, 25, and the book in the front, and because I'm kind of a visual person, I printed those. I took the photos and I printed them out, right? And so when I was driving around all over the place in my rig, every time I'd finish one, I just get a highlighter and I just put a little line down it so that I can say, okay, I did that, right? But there are many, many more places beyond the 75 in the Ireichō database, especially now that it's no longer beta and it went live at the beginning of 2025 when it hit the road. So does anybody have a wild guess as how many camps there are in the database now? Just anybody? Okay, I'll just tell you. 290, okay? 290. Now some of these are duplicates because people when they were incarcerated, and especially there's a lot of jails, small jails, and hospitals and sanitariums, because back then there was no cure or no treatment really, no good treatment for tuberculosis. So there were a lot of sanitariums all over the place, and people just go there, be sequestered, and then die. That's kind of what happened to them until antibiotics came out, right? So there's a lot of those places, and a lot of them no longer exist. Okay? A lot of jails, the jails don't exist. Or when people were locked up in jails, they would say, I was in, for example, I just went recently to El Centro, California, which is right along the border of Southern California, and it's in Imperial County. And so it never was its own county. It was always in Imperial County. And so there's the Imperial County courthouse with the jail, and then there's, but the people were listed as, El Centro County Jail. Well, it was the same place. People didn't know exactly how to call it what it was, right? So there was a lot of jail overlap. That's a problem. Okay, so here's where the convergence comes in. I had just finished the first of the 3 loops across the northern part of the U.S. because I went across the first time on the northern section. Then I went through the kind of the middle, and I did pick up some stuff in the south. And then the last one, I went through the south and came all the way around and circled back. I went all the way to Chicago and then came back through the south again, right? So it was a kind of a cleanup round. So I could finish what I thought was the lower 48. Little did I know there's hundreds more places, right? It just the list never ends. But what I did was, when I was traveling around, I started using the Ireichō back end because it was available, right? And so I could see who was there. I could see who we knew was there. And I started noticing that the names were appearing all over the place. I would look at that person's profile in Ireichō and see that, he was like in 5 different places. And I became interested in the people that were there, and it made it real. You know what I mean? Even if I didn't know anybody, if I didn't have people there, I knew there was these people there, and this person was of interest specifically, right? And so I followed a bunch of people like that as I'm traveling around. And when I would come across somebody who I knew nobody was looking for that person, okay? It was a Issei. He was single. He had no family. One of the guys I followed, I just got totally interested in who he was Hiroto Isamura, and he was from Terminal Island, and he was killed at Lordsburg, New Mexico, by a guard. Him and another guy, right? He was kind of disabled, and he couldn't walk very fast, and the guy he wasn't. The guard just killed both of them on the road to the Lordsburg camp. So I started trying to track where he was, because what happened to him, right? So I finally found him. He was buried. They had moved all the graves from Lordsburg, which is an army camp, to the Fort Bliss Military Cemetery, the National Cemetery at Fort Bliss in Texas. It's El Paso, Texas, right? Nobody had visited him ever. ever. But I did, and so did the Daruma. So everywhere I go, it's kind of a watermark. I put this. I take a picture of something that shows where I am with the Daruma, so that it's kind of like a watermark. So it's a stamp, that a validation that I was there, they were there, and so when you when you travel around by yourself, because of the 31,000 miles that I drove in the United States mainland, 28,000 of it was by myself, okay, alone, right? And that in itself is tricky. If you are thinking of doing it, see me after this, okay? Because it's not for everybody. But what I would do is I would find people, and I'd come back to home, and I'd go to LA, and I would stamp their name to make sure that they were remembered in the book. So overall, I have stamped like 75 names, something like that. And I'm not related to, most of them, but I still stamp their names, because if I don't, who will? Right? So I use all the resources. I use all the resources that I have, Ancestry.com, the Ireichō, everything that I have, to try to figure out who these people are, so I can write a little blog about them, because that's what makes it real. Because I go to the place, I stand where I try to go to where they were, right? I'm standing where they stood, and I try to feel what they must have felt, right? And I go and stamp their name in the book, so that they're not forgotten. So, the difference here is that the Ireichō and the Ireichō project, they're permanent. Those are permanent things, right? And the book, the book itself is just a book, no matter how symbolic all the pieces of it are, until you stamp it. Then it becomes a monument. You become part of the monument. All the little hanko that are in there, all the thousands and thousands and thousands of hanko that are in there, are part of the monument. That's what makes it the monument. It would be like if you were going to build a stone monument and everybody brought a little pebble to contribute to the building of it, right? So that's permanent, right? But my pilgrimage is a way to console the spirits while I'm there. I'm going where they went. I'm standing where they stood. I'm seeing their names. Sometimes if there's not like hundreds of them, I have actually read their names out loud standing in the place where there's nothing. There's no marker. There's no signs. There's nothing, right? I actually say their names out loud, just because I can, because I have a list, right? So yeah. And basically reflect on what they lost and what happened to them. So I have some tips on using the Ireichō and things that maybe you haven't thought of yet. If you're going to check for an incarceree, and all, you can use the back-end database. Now it's tricky because the fact of the matter is, even though it is a database, the interface itself is kind of limited. Okay. The way it parses name entries is kind of rudimentary. It doesn't do what I want it to do. But I have a couple of examples. But what's good about the menu for the Ireichō is that if you find any mistakes, like you're looking at if you log in there and you find your relative or your person, and you look at their profile, if things wrong, like the date's wrong, their birth year is wrong, their name is not quite right, it's not spelled right, or there's a camp missing or something like this, they want to know about it, and you can actually submit amendments right through the interface. I've done that many times, many. Okay, I'm just a regular person. I don't work on the Ireichō team. I'm actually using that information that they provide to do what I'm doing, which is the pilgrimage. okay, the personal pilgrimage. But there's another, you can see all the camps in the camps list, all the ones I'm talking about. But there's another feature there that even if you don't stamp the book, and that's another point, is that you don't have to be related to anybody to stamp the book. You can stamp anybody's name in there, okay? And especially if no one else is going to do it, it's up to you, right? But you can stamp any name. It doesn't have to. You don't have to be related to them or anything like that. You don't even have to know them, right? So yeah, they welcome all of that. And then there's another feature there that is the Voicing Refuge page. Now, I've recorded a bunch of different versions of people's names and so forth. But there's the project is ongoing. It's actually kind of in its early stages. But at some point, they want to be able to, when you look at this, when you look at somebody's profile, you can hear their name. And it's a name that's being said by somebody who wants to say their name, right? That makes it real, right? So here's an example of what the interface. Basically, I've already run a query. I searched by name. I said Watanabe at Manzanar. Okay, that's my dad's family. So up here you can see right here. That's my grandmother. That's my grandfather. There's my uncle. There's my dad right there, Yoshiyuki Joe Watanabe. Okay, so the output of the Ireichō findings, right, for that particular query will represent itself in the same kind of format that you would see when you in the book, the physical book, right? It's listed in order of birth year and then birth month. I think there's another subcategory of birth month and then alphabetically. So this, and when you find, like I clicked on Yoshiyuki Joe Watanabe, this is actually a digital plaque, like if you had it on the wall, okay? So when you look at it, it should say, it's like a little monument in and of itself. It would be on the wall, but that's what it's meant to show. It's a digital plaque, like a marker, for your person that you're looking for. But see that little tiny thing that the red arrow is pointing at? You click on that, and it takes you to a place where you can record that person's name and other stuff, right? And then eventually, you submit the recording to them, and they'll scrutinize it and see if it's okay or whatever. And at some point, they're going to use it. It's going to be deployed, right? And that's how everybody can participate in this monument, right? It's a digital monument, but it's still a monument, and that's how you do it, okay? So, just this is a little view of like all the dots and represent just the incarceration sites. There's like there's one up there at Fort Richardson. I did fly up there, and they had to let me on the base because I went to the cemetery. The cemetery's on the base, which you can't get in there unless you have a military ID, any otherwise, right? But they will give you a visitor thing if you want to go there. And then you see the Hawaii ones. These are the ones in Hawaii. So just this week, went to a couple more. So I'm up to. I had gone to 17, so I got 2 more. It's 19 now, but there's actually more than that. So as soon as Sheila figures out where they are, okay, I'm gonna go there, right? We still working on that, and yeah. And so what I want to say is that along the way, I used heavily when I was exploring Hawaii, because I've been here back in May, where I actually went to like 6 islands and in 12 days and flew 9 times and all this, to try to get this done, right? And then I had to come back. But along the way, I always put together a little dossier for each one of the places that I'm going. I have a printout of who was there, some information about what the place was, what the place was, and so forth. And I used the articles that Kelli wrote that are in Densho, and then I used data from Sheila's database, the Hawaii Internees Database, to try to flesh out who these people were, because a lot of times we only know like one person or a couple of people, and there's nothing to look at. There's no marker. There's no building. The place is like not even there now, right? So what am I going to talk about, right? And so I use that information heavily. And if you haven't explored around the Hawaii Internee Database, you need to do that. There's interesting stuff in there. I mean, the only place you're going to find out about internees there that are in Hawaii are but like what their occupations were and stuff is in her database. Okay, so it's interesting to know that the place, the Oahu prison that I just went to, is the only person we know of that was in there was a milkman. Why? Why was he in there? These raise questions. That's another thing about doing a pilgrimage like this, is it raises more questions than it answers. That's what's inciting about it, right? It's your job to connect the dots.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you so much to all of our speakers. So Joanne has listed some of the additional resources for all of us. And now it's time to welcome some questions from the audience. Does anyone have a question? Yes.
My question is, it was mentioned that there were 2,400 internees at, okay. Is that how many, is that what they know? I mean, is that the actual number, or are there more that we don't know about, and do we have names?
That is a great question. So the database, we like to think of it as an actual sort of a living thing. It changes. The census changes. We were able to go to the National Archives a couple of years ago through a federal grant. And in doing that, we've discovered additional names. So the number does change. Right now, I think it's actually at 2,470, close to 75, something like that. But it does change.
Hi, my name is Raymond Zinn, active duty United States Air Force. I wanted to share that the 442nd was actually very instrumental for me joining the military, formerly a high school teacher on the 9th Island, Las Vegas, Nevada. I wanted to ask, I grew up actually in Torrance, and one of the most important, social media stars before YouTube, or starting at YouTube, was actually from Gardena, California. His name was Joe Jitsukawa and Bart Kwan from San Gabriel Valley and Gardena, California. They actually have a matcha shop in rural Hawaiian called Junbi, Junbi. And I just wanted to ask, just the economic impact of the internment camps. From my understanding, a lot of the internees' property, businesses, a lot of the farms, like strawberry farms in Washington State, California, were either stolen or looted during their time in internment camps. And also the last names, a lot of them were changed to avoid discrimination. I think it was a lot easier for people of German ancestry or Italian ancestry and Jewish ancestry to sort of blend in with more of the Anglo-American population at the time. Just want to see if you have anything related to that.
I think I'll give that a shot. Since I'm from the West Coast and all my people were farmers, actually, or in agriculture. There were over 7,500 farms that were run on the West Coast by Japanese people, right? By people of Japanese ancestry, and the ones that a lot of the ones that survived were because they were for some reason able to buy the land. Now, many places would not sell their land; you'd have to lease it, right? Even to this day, like in Irvine, for example, you can't buy the land; you have to lease it. They won't sell it. But there were a few farms around that were the people had kids that were old enough to own the property, so they were able to have, be able to come back to it. So right now, there's a project, a history project, a Concha, to identify all the farms, that were on the West Coast. But it was a touch and go type of thing. It depended on what happened to your farm, right? And for all the people that weren't farmers or that were in the cities and so forth, they had to get rid of everything in a very short period of time. I mean, they had to get rid of everything. Like my my mom's family, they were living in Hollywood. My grandfather was a gardener, right, or a landscaper, and so they weren't farmers. They're not a farm. My mother and her mother and her sister, they didn't know how to farm, but it depends on where they put their money. So if you put your money in a Japanese bank, they confiscated that. Now I had one on my dad's side. I had one relative who actually put his money in the Bank of America or someplace, so it was still there. Okay, so it depends. But like in the case of all those people that were sent to Montreat, from Hawaii, I think I read that they were only able to take like $10 with them. That when they left, the government told them they could only take like a really small amount of money, so they couldn't afford to buy anything, clothes, anything, right? And it was like that. You had to get rid of everything, like 10 cents on the dollar and all this kind of stuff. And when what really became apparent was when they came back from the camps to the West Coast, and things like that. It was like, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
25,000 people trying to, come back to LA. There was no place to live. That was a problem.
We have an online question. I think this might be for Sheila. How to get started trying to find a name of a relative, maybe you only know the nickname.
Great question. So our database has a keyword search box. I would start there if you only know part of the name. I think if you scroll down towards the bottom of the homepage and you click on limit search to exact match.
And we'll type in the website address into the chat box so people can just click on it.
Thank you.
I just have a quick question. Do you know why some internees were just moved to so many different locations? What the reason was for that?
That was part of the torture.
Well, I think with the Hawaii internees, it's an interesting situation going on. The Issei were moved around a lot. So they had their own sequence. They went through Justice Department camps, and maybe a half a dozen of them. Added to that, once they got out of the Justice Department system, they may have been paroled, sent to WRA camps. So that's adding another 2 maybe. So yeah, that's why there are a lot of them. So these are for the people that left Hawaii and went to the mainland.
I have a question about the person who was a doctor who was interned. Was that common, or were most doctors left here in Hawaii because they were suspected of being spies?
Yeah, in the case of the Moris, they specifically were suspected of being spies. There were a number of doctors from Hawaii who were sent to camp, but as a profession as a whole, I think that they weren't necessarily picked up. Yeah.
But I wonder why the Mori.
Because Ireichō Mori specifically was suspected of being a spy, and her husband Motokazu also. Yeah, they were. So Ireichō was a correspondent for the Yomiuri newspaper, and but she did that as a way. She had to return to Japan, and it was a way to go back and be able to come back to Hawaii. They suspected her of being a spy. The feds there was a commission that looked into it all. They never were able to produce any evidence that she was in fact spying.
I have a question for Dr. Nakamura. There is a physical structure on the Honolulu campsite.
Yes.
Do you know anything about it? Does that really date back to the internment period?
So right now, especially with the more recent kind of federal shutdown, I've been actually in correspondence with the new superintendent, who's actually going to try to open up the park a little bit more, essentially to visitors, and continue essentially archaeological and preservation efforts. The University of Hawaii at West Oahu has been actively involved in that in the past, and we hope with kind of the dual kind of impacts of both COVID, as well as, of course, the unique kind of situation with the federal government that we are currently experiencing, that there's going to be greater efforts to provide commemoration of that particular site, particularly, of course, this year, which is the 10-year anniversary of Honolulu being designated as a national park and as a national site. For those of you, of course, who may not be familiar with that particular site, the challenge with that particular area is that it goes through private land. So it's not just simply an issue of essentially preservation and actual access to inside the valley itself, but actually access through essentially private land. Also, as you, of course, I'm sure do know with Monsanto, and essentially the issues of having essentially civilians go through essentially that particular area.
Can I ask, did you specifically mean the chicken coop?
Yeah, there's a specific structure there, and it just seems strange to me that they try to eliminate the camp completely, but there is one wooden structure that's falling apart. And,
I mean, there's weird things that they do find there. Absolutely, they do find, plumbing, and they do find, weirdly enough, like a chicken coop, glass bottles, just certain remnants. It's very unusual what is or is not being kind of preserved. I was actually talking with Joanne here, saying actually that structure has deteriorated even further since the last 5 years, since I particularly saw that, which is in Molokai itself. So it's weird what is and is not being preserved at this particular time. And you saw in my photos that the structure was standing, and in this particular photo, as you can tell, one building has entirely collapsed. Yeah, that's from more recent. So that photo was actually taken previously before COVID, so 5 years. And 5 years later, this is the state of this particular structure. It literally has collapsed. So that is a great point, a great question, why certain structures have been preserved or not.
I think that particular structure, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's listed in the special resource study that MPS had to do. I think, not too sure. So there might be more information on the actual special research, because that was one of the structures that were existing when they took over.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if it says if it was existing or if it got rebuilt, because it was used as a ranch kind of after, so it could have been right. Right. Yeah. So but I think the special resource study particularly, I have to check. I mean, I think we have it in the resource center, but I think that specific building is referenced because that's the only one that was up. Everything else is all
Destroyed.
Platform foundations. Oh, I have one more online question. Is there a sense that in Hawaii people know whether they had a relative or family friend, etc., who was a camp prisoner? If it's not really living history talked about, what can we do about that? So two-part question. Do people have a sense here locally if their family was potentially impacted by incarceration? And if not, what's happening in the community to talk about it?
I think yes and no. I mean, to be perfectly honest, it actually kind of concerns me that there's no contemporary, a counterpart to myself, or even in the younger generation. And I'm in my 40s. So to imagine that that there's no one to really kind of take over this story, to continue on this kind of understanding, that is actually very concerning for me. And I say that also respectfully for other communities that were also affected by war. For example, the Okinawan community, or the Korean American community, or the Filipino American community. I don't see, unfortunately, too many contemporaries that still kind of are interested or even really kind of understand what is actually going on here. I think it is up to us to not just, of course, spread word about our families and our communities, but to share our stories with our own family members and to really kind of talk about the impact of this event upon our particular history. I do discuss how essentially we see very divergent fates of different communities and families impacted by incarceration. So, for example, the Mori family, we saw a very kind of different fate experiencing by them. Yes, they in part return to their status as doctors, but we do also see kind of a personal story that also came out with one of the family members who in fact committed suicide after essentially the war. Versus, of course, other family members who, for example, some Nisei, of course, definitely profited and benefited from the GI Bill. Other internee families experienced shame because of the incarceration experience. So really to kind of understand the very kind of divergent fate, I think, that our community members have experienced, and something that I think Joanne is still trying to memorialize and understand for those who, in fact, were forgotten. I think that is still a very important task that is beholden upon us to kind of take upon us.
I have a different kind of question for you. Because in Hawaii, martial law was declared on December 7th or December 8th, some academics look at it as a different internment story than the mainland. Because once martial law was declared, it was all legal in Hawaii to intern anybody. Is that an area of academic interest in Hawaii?
I mean, not quite. I mean, this is where we do depend upon, for example, the research of other individuals, like, for example, Bill Kaneko, who talks about essentially the restitution that essentially those, for example, who lost, essentially who were forcibly removed from their homes, from their farms, for example, in the areas surrounding Pearl Harbor and, of course, Lualua essentially, we do see essentially that being another impact that I think that it depends upon not just academics, but also community members. Bill Kaneko, by profession, of course, is an attorney, but he is passionate about his essentially experience, having been, of course, a representative of the JACL as an attorney to fight for the restitution for these individuals. So I think it goes beyond just simply an academic kind of focus, but rather, of course, from individuals such as yourselves to really kind of pursue these interests and to essentially draw attention to these kinds of stories or these kinds of issues. Again, the fact that I do not see too many contemporaries in the academic field, in part because it is such a small, specialized field. To be perfectly honest, my bread and butter is paid teaching general world history or American history courses. And this is kind of only a side interest that I actually have, and I'm privileged to be able to do so. But it is not a particular specialized field or discipline. And in fact, because we do see this story fading with the subsequent generations, it is something that it is, again, I'm going to keep on saying this, beholden upon us to keep on preserving.
I personally have more questions I would love to ask each of you, but I think we need to wrap it up. We've already exceeded the time of the presentation. So once again, let's give a hand to our wonderful presenters today. And they will be available to answer questions if you have any. And thank you again to thank you to our JCCH staff for helping me out, our volunteer Ronnie, and thank you to our audience for joining us. Let's all remember to honor the people who have sacrificed so much for all of us to be here today, and also to keep carrying forth our commitments to our values and democracy. Thank you for joining us.